9 News at 6 is on right now.
Tonight, an elderly man, then his daughter and a third person confirmed as Adelaide COVID cases infected with a dangerous Delta strain.
Tough restrictions from midnight. Many retailers forced to close. No indoor dining, no team sports and masks in many public places.
Hundreds in quarantine, Modbury Hospital and exposure site. So too shops across Adelaide's northeast and west.
The message from authorities tonight is that testing is vital. Many already heeding their call.
And how the outbreak is tonight causing dangerous delays right across our hospital system.
This is Adelaide's 9 News.
Good evening. As of midnight, South Australia is going to the highest level of restrictions short of a lockdown because the COVID threat has today landed on our doorstep.
A man tested positive at the Modbury Hospital in the early hours of this morning, and by this afternoon there were already 2 more cases. We have reporters across the state standing by to bring you the very latest. Rory McLaren begins tonight's coverage.
Masked Modbury Hospital staff bussed to isolation. Every precaution taken after the COVID alarm was raised in the early hours of this morning, and arrival at the hospital returning a positive test.
We're on high alert in South Australia at the moment.
An 81-year-old man infectious in the community for days, and the first transmission his daughter, meaning for the rest of South Australia there's no escaping the consequences.
We have no choice but to put in enhanced restrictions in place as of midnight tonight.
Density caps have moved to 1 person per 4 square metres. Private gatherings are capped at 10. Dining in venues is outdoor only and must be seated. Non-essential retail will close, as will gyms and personal care sites. All sport is cancelled. Singing and dancing remains banned. Masks are required in high-risk settings, on public transport and in other areas where social distancing can't be maintained. Working from home is also encouraged. Travel to the regions discouraged.
In terms of schools, schools are, as well as offices, unrestricted activities, which means the requirement to wear masks in indoor public settings does not specifically apply to schools or offices, but there will be requirements that need to be worked with through our consultation with the Education Department.
At this stage, the plan is for the restrictions to stay in place until Friday.
I know that these restrictions are going to put a heavy toll on businesses and on individuals. It's going to frustrate plans that people have already put in place.
The infected man had been in Argentina, where he'd received 1 vaccine dose before his return to Australia. He was in hotel quarantine in Sydney but suffered a fall, requiring a 10-day hospital stay. Still testing negative, he arrived in Adelaide on July 8. It's unclear where he contracted the virus.
His most infectious period is from the 14th up until now. Of course, he did come into the state a little bit before that, so we're going to be doing contact tracing right back.
He arrived at the Modbury with respiratory symptoms late yesterday, forcing the closure of the entire emergency department.
He has in fact got 16 primary close contacts that we've been able to get information about today. So he's got quite a large family here in South Australia.
We don't want a lockdown if we can avoid it, and that's why at the moment the next 24, 48 hours are going to be absolutely critical for our state.
Adelaide today, health authorities confirmed a 3rd case linked to this outbreak. A man in his 50s who's deemed a primary close contact of the initial case. While 57 staff members from Modbury Hospital have now been transferred to Medi hotels around the city, including here at the Stanford Plaza on North Terrace. Kate, at this stage they face the prospect of 14 days in isolation.
Rory, thank you. And with the fast-moving situation, the list of exposure sites is expected to grow rapidly. Ella Duffy is in Golden Grove. Ella, there are some big centres already on the list.
Kate, some of the locations that have already been identified include large shopping centres like this one here at Golden Grove, and also another entire shopping centre at St Agnes. And we know tonight that at least another 4 exposure sites have been identified by authorities, but SA Health is yet to release the exact details of those. They will be added though to the venues of concern that were announced earlier today. Customers with full trolleys caught off guard by the snap closure of Gaganis Brothers in Hindmarsh amid revelations the store had been exposed to COVID-19. Word only reaching the store just as it was announced to the rest of SA.
They just said we're shut. You got to leave.
The COVID positive man visited between 1 and 2:30 p.m. on Friday, July 16.
It's terrible. Yeah, I try to avoid to have a mask all the time.
I've been vaccinated, so I'm not concerned.
Contact tracers scrambling to pinpoint sites across the city, tracking the man's movements from his arrival on July 8.
But we're focusing on this higher risk period, particularly the last couple of days.
The Commonwealth Bank in Modbury on the list. He visited on July 13 from 10 to 11:25 a.m. and July 14 between 10:30 and 12:15. The branch closed today.
It's probably best to stay away, I guess, because I guess you don't know if they spoke to someone there and then if they could have been in contact with other people in the branch, and yeah, it's a little bit scary.
That's a good idea that they are closed then, because I wouldn't like to get it. Not at my age anyway.
The St Agnes shopping centre also identified on July 13 between 10:30 and 11:30, the Aldi supermarket of most concern.
It's absolutely terrible. Yeah, it's quite scary, especially because Adelaide's done such a good job so far. It's a little bit scary to see that it's hit home.
And on Saturday the 17th, the Golden Grove shopping centre between 3 p.m. and 4:45, specifically the OPSM store and the Grove News Agency.
And because of the QR check-in system, we'll be able to SMS anybody that was at those particular places at those points in time.
Anyone caught in the exposure window required to isolate for 14 days and get tested immediately, while anyone who was in Wiggly Reserve in Glenelg between 12:30 and 1:15 p.m. on the 16th is urged to monitor for symptoms. The movement of the man's 16 close contacts also under scrutiny.
And this is our double ring fencing, which is the method that we use in South Australia to try and get ahead of this very infectious and transmissible disease, particularly the Delta variant.
One of those sites, the Elizabeth Vale Primary School, closed today because the infectious man's grandson is a teacher, but it has since been cleared. Ella Duffy, 9 News.
Let's now go to the tough restrictions that begin from midnight. Personal services like hairdressers, barbers and nail salons will need to close their doors. Businesses like hotels, cafes and restaurants will once again be hard hit. Our reporter Mike Lorigan is in Rundle Street, where the news of level 4 restrictions has been quite shocking.
Well, Brenton, this is obviously one of the busiest hospitality sections of our city, and many businesses here are already dealing with the tough decision that they have to make to shut their doors at midnight tonight. It is simply not economically viable for many to continue trading under these restrictions. We spoke with one small suburban bar a little earlier in Goodwood, Good Gilbert, which employs 7 people, and they have already made a very heartbreaking decision to shut their doors. Take a listen.
It means we can only accommodate 4 people at a time, which is not enough to sustain a business. We're only new. We're going to have to shut down until further notice.
Now, this is just so widespread. The Australian Hotels Association says that this will wipe millions from the economy, and given the weather at the moment, it is effectively a lockdown.
This is effectively a lockdown for hospitality. In the middle of winter, with rain and sleet and hail, it's a nonsense to suggest that outside dining is going to sustain these businesses.
Now, as you heard off the top there, gyms and indoor fitness facilities, they will also close for the rest of the week at least, and this has forced many, like they have many times over the last 18 months, forced them to think outside the box.
It is frustrating, it has its ups and downs. There is a lot more people probably more affected than the gym and fitness industry, I suppose. But yeah, it's one of those things, you just got to diversify a little bit and provide other services so people can keep moving.
So as you heard, there are so many industries that are affected. Personal care, that includes hairdressers, massage parlours, nail salons, among a few. The private gathering rules as well, that will acutely affect the wedding and funeral industry. There is not one aspect of life and society that isn't going to be affected by these restrictions, and all are hoping this lockdown isn't extended beyond Friday. Kate?
Mike, thank you. Well, there haven't been signs of large-scale panic buying so far, but Coles has made a preemptive strike, introducing a 2-pack per person limit on toilet paper effective immediately. It says it has plenty of supply, but purchase limits are a bid to manage demand. The Premier earlier issued a plea for South Australians to avoid rushing to the supermarkets.
There's been a huge surge at COVID testing sites across Adelaide, particularly in the areas most affected by the new cases. Live now to Harvey Biggs. Harvey, what's the situation like there at Outbreak?
Well, Brenton, in the last 20 minutes or so, police have begun stopping people from getting into the line here to get themselves tested, and that's because this clinic was supposed to close at 4 p.m. this afternoon. So what they're going to do is to swab everyone who's been waiting here before they close. But all afternoon we saw lines stretching for kilometres down North East Road as people rushed here to get themselves checked. And it follows high testing rates over the weekend, with some 18,500 swabs taken on Saturday and Sunday, and the Premier is urging South Australians to keep it going.
Now is not a time to be complacent. We're on high alert in South Australia at the moment. Any symptoms whatsoever, please go and get yourself tested. Let's not take any chances.
The new cases have also prompted pleas from health officials to get vaccinated if you are eligible.
We don't have much time. As soon as it's available for you and you're in that age group, you need to get vaccinated. And I think South Australians understand the urgency of doing this.
So, Kate, the message is if you've been to any of the exposure sites or have any symptoms, get yourselves tested.
Harvey Biggs there in Modbury, thank you. The other region of concern in South Australia is the Riverland because of its proximity to Mildura in Victoria, where there have been 2 positive cases. Ashley Wick is at Renmark tonight. Ash, there's been a surge in testing across the region.
Yeah, there sure has. Now, the wait to get tested at the Riverland General Hospital today was over an hour. Most of the people that we spoke with, they'd recently been in or around the Mildura area. Today, they all received text messages from SA Health ordering they get tested immediately, and tonight they're isolating for 14 days. A region that's tonight on high alert. Riverland residents warned not to travel outside the bubble. Health authorities holding grave fears that the Delta strain may have leaked into the community after 2 positive cases were detected in Mildura.
This person who was infectious way back till the 11th, so that was a week ago, when there weren't any restrictions for regional Victoria and South Australia.
The main concern for Riverland residents is the amount of traffic between Mildura and Renmark before the border controls were tightened.
People from Mildura go to Adelaide for a lot of stuff, so they pass through here, so yeah, you never know what's going to happen.
As of midnight, the border bubble was reduced to 40 kilometres. The reasons for travel also reduced: education, work and to get vaccinated among them. Today, the testing centre at Berry was swamped by Riverland residents who had recently returned from Mildura.
We've just received a text message to say that if we've been in Mildura area, we need to isolate.
Across the border, Mildura's testing site was so overwhelmed that by mid-morning it was forced to shut. At the border, frustration grew among truck drivers.
Probably a little bit slow. They could probably have another couple of staff here would help.
Many having visited Mildura while the positive cases were infectious in the community.
Yeah, just a bit worried about it, because Mildura, it's such a small but big community where everyone knows everyone.
As Riverland residents tonight face an anxious wait for their test results, the advice for the rest of South Australia is clear.
If people are heading off for a holiday now and they're heading to the Riverland, we would ask them to reconsider the need for that. The strong advice is to limit unnecessary travel into and out of the Riverland because of what's happened in Mildura.
Ashley Wick, 9 News.
New South Wales has recorded 98 cases today, 20 of them infectious while in the community. More than 2/3 of today's cases were recorded in Sydney's southwest, while a citywide stop on all construction work has come into effect today as authorities in the Harbour City work to stop the transmission of cases. The state also recorded another COVID-19 related death, the 5th fatality this outbreak, a woman in her 50s who was found dead in her home.
Meanwhile, Victoria is in lockdown limbo tonight. Premier Daniel Andrews announcing current restrictions will not end at midnight tomorrow as expected, with the new end date still to be confirmed. The state recorded 16 new cases today, all but one infectious in the community.
We have avoided thousands of cases. Knowing what we know now, lockdown was the right course. That was the right call at the right time. It was and remains very challenging. But we will not be ready to lift this lockdown at midnight tomorrow night.
The Premier refused to rule out toughening controls along the New South Wales border.
The COVID cases that sparked drastic action here in Adelaide are also tonight contributing to a crisis in our hospitals. Kate Lamb has details on what's happening now. Kate, you're being told the situation is dire across our major metro hospitals.
Kate, with the emergency department at the Modbury Hospital closed, every other metropolitan hospital has struggled with an internal disaster declared in both the northern and southern health networks, along with here at the Royal Adelaide Hospital due to overcrowding. It's also put incredible pressure on our paramedics, with 17 ambulances ramped at the Flinders Medical Centre at its peak today. The SA ambulance is declaring an internal disaster too, sending an urgent text message calling for extra staff. The union says that with QR contact tracing still underway, it's likely that more ambulance crews who were picking up and dropping off patients at the Modbury Hospital around the time of the confirmed case, that they may also be forced into quarantine, which could lead to significant staffing issues.
We are aware that of the 28 ambulance crews that are normally rostered on over a night shift, that the ambulance service is struggling to staff 14 of those, so 50% of the workforce overnight, that the ambulance service may or may not be able to staff at this stage. The ambulance service has declared an internal disaster.
The fear now is that if there is a bigger outbreak, that our already struggling system will simply not be able to cope, and the insufficient resources will simply put patients' lives at risk. Brenton?
Yeah, very concerning indeed. Kate Lamb, thank you. We'll continue with our COVID coverage a little later. Time now to look ahead at sport. Treader's another big name player to miss the next fortnight in quarantine.
Yeah, and he's only just come back from a long-term injury, and we'll have that story coming up later in sport, along with how this week's fixture shake-up affects the Crows and Power, as the Power prepares for a run into the finals with a trio of young stars back on deck.
Thanks, Treaders. We'll see you later. Well, booted out for behaving badly, the controversial British television star sent packing from hotel quarantine in Sydney after flouting the rules. And rolling over not once but twice, the road mishap on a busy South Australian highway.